Hello, I'm Carwyn Jones and welcome to this week's weekly business review, looking at the issues that are affecting the business community in the midst of coronavirus. I'm very, very pleased to be joined here by two guests. One is Alwen Williams. Alwen is the Programme Director of the Economic Ambition Board in North Wales and somebody with extensive experience in telecoms before that, working for BT and Openreach. Alwen, croeso mawr.
Thank you, diolch.
And by Wayne Preece. Wayne is the CEO of Hydro Industries, which is a business with many tasks, clean water, environmental treatment, waste treatment, you name it. Many of you will have seen the contract that the company recently won in Egypt. Wayne is somebody with the experience before he came to Hydro in Thales, in Sony, and in the defence industry, but we're not allowed to talk about that. But Wayne, you're very welcome indeed.
Thank you, Carwyn.
Well, once again, we're in the grip of coronavirus, but I thought it was time to start looking at the future. It's going to be a while before we get out of all the lockdown, and it's going to be a gradual process. There's no question about that. But lots of people are starting to talk now about what the future might mean. What does it mean? What does the experience mean for people? Does it mean, for example, that we won't have as many offices in the future? What does that mean for the retail sector and also, of course, for the property sector? What does it mean in terms of how people will behave in the future? Will we see, for example, more people thinking about local supply chains, given the fact that there are so many businesses in Wales who want to manufacture but can't at the moment because they can't get their hands on the parts that they need from other countries? How do we think that thinking will develop in the future? Let's start with the future economy. This is the kind of shock that the world hasn't seen arguably since 1919, when the world was less integrated than it is now. Alwen, if I could ask you first of all, how do you see the economy developing in the future, in the aftermath of the virus?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I think we'll be working to a very different baseline. All of the assumptions that we've made in terms of economic development and economic growth are going to be tested very much by what's left behind as a situation from COVID-19. I think if I take my own sort of perspectives and step back 5 years, we've probably delivered and seen happen a digital transformation over the last month that would have taken years to deliver under normal circumstances, which has changed behaviours, it's changed the way communities interact together. And all of that will have an impact on the economy overall and what is required by communities from the local economy and the global economy. I think the skills and the understanding that we are developing as individuals, businesses, communities, families, from having to live our lives in a very different way now is driving behaviours of different kinds. But it's also testing innovation. It's driving new innovation. So certainly my hope is that the economy of the future looks different, but looks vibrant with new innovations, with new businesses, with new opportunities for actually the term working. And new, skills, employment opportunities, and businesses to support those, and possibly even, fundamental changes in the sort of educational sector in the future to service this new economy. So I think it's a whole systematic change, and I don't think anybody really knows, probably even the best economists, where it's going to land at the moment.
In Wayne, from your perspective, what challenges have you faced as a business? Obviously, your line of work, I would assume there are many opportunities, but as with every other business, no doubt the virus has had an effect on you.
Yes, I think, Karen, working from home with a young family is the first challenge, and realising actually how hard my wife works. That's been the first shock to the system. I think looking at what we do, we supply, in some cases, drinking water to people that really need it. And I don't mean mature domestic markets. I mean, some African countries. We do some work with BRAC, for instance, in Bangladesh, very, very large charity there. And also the environmental cleanup work we do. It doesn't stop. We've got to carry on doing it. So the challenge for us has been, how do we work remotely, first of all, as a team, with all different skills, from project managers to chemists, to PhDs in electronics and all sorts of different skills that pull together technology and the delivery that we do. And then also doing stuff. So, I mean, the people on the ground, the electricians, the people have to get on planes to deliver this stuff. And obviously that's the bit that we can't do. So we've taken this as an opportunity to really prepare. So the project Egypt, you mentioned earlier, which we think, Karen, is the biggest export deal by an indigenous Welsh company. So we're very proud of 18 months worth of work to get that over the line. But actually 2 weeks after that moment, as you mentioned earlier, in number 10, everything stopped. So we've spoken to our clients in that instance. We have had to work from offices and from homes to keep the heartbeat going. But at some point, our business, we have to get on the ground. So we've learned very rapidly of how to work remotely. We're quite a tactile organization. We like to do face-to-face stuff, and we like to get around the table and sometimes argue things out to make sure these solutions are robust. But we've had to, in the last couple of weeks, work in a different way, and I think that's made us think a little bit differently as well, particularly about very, very strong academic characters that we've got working for Hydro, and as you know, some of the migration problems that we have in Wales, losing some of these very skilled people across the border. Who knows, that might pull things back together a little bit more in Wales and give us another perspective of how we look at things going forward, Carwyn.
From your perspective, you mentioned there the fact that you need that contact with people at a social level to create that business relationship. Lots of people have said, well, a lot of meetings will now take place over Zoom, for example. Other platforms are available. But ultimately, do you feel that if you're going to do business with someone, you need to meet them and you need to judge them as a personality in order to be able to trust them? Yeah,
I'm not going to go into Brexit anyway, but we had probably a 4-week window between Brexit and COVID-19 where things seemed relatively normal during that period. Carwyn, when you're dealing, for instance, culturally in the Middle East, you are not going to do deals in the Middle East over the phone, particularly new relationships. If we've built up relationships in the Middle East, and we'll work those as we do over the next few weeks, as we will over the next few weeks. But if you're operating in the Middle East, in that culture in particular, you need to speak to people, and it's a trust thing, and it's a closeness thing. Other parts of the world are a little bit different, but in general terms, you're 100% right. You're not going to get sales. You're not going to win those orders unless you're meeting people face to face.
Alwen, thanks for that. Now, from your perspective, are you picking up any noises from business who might be thinking, well, hang on a second, here am I renting an office for my 5 or 6 staff. Actually, I don't need an office. I can do all this remotely. Is that something that you're hearing at all?
I think it's early days for that sort of level of thinking at the moment. I've no doubt that once we're through the worst period of this, I've no doubt that thinking will play a part in, what future businesses and business premises need to be. I think at the moment, very much from the business community, certainly in North Wales and probably more broadly, their immediate focus is on the preservation of their business, and that they need to, look after the employees they have in the immediate sort of context of what COVID is doing. I do think that further down the line, there will be a sort of a line of thought around, how much businesses spend on premises and whether there is a balance to be struck between, as Wayne said, doing business in a traditional sense, where you have offices and the opportunity to sort of meet people face to face, and how effective people will now see you can be by working remotely as well. I think it's a cultural shift that will stick, actually. I think people will see a benefit to them in their personal lives from having the ability to spend more time maybe working from home, and for it to be more of a choice on where they go and do their work. And I think an agile nation that can be dynamic and can be equipped with what you need, equipment-wise and infrastructure, digital infrastructure-wise, to work from anywhere, should be one of the benefits, I think, of having to go through this awful pandemic in order to get, to a better place.
Wayne, from your perspective, do you see any new opportunities that may have arisen as a result of this? I mean, let's not pretend that any of this is good. Of course it's not. I mean, it's an awful situation for everyone involved, for families and, of course, for businesses. But do you think there's anything in terms of behaviour change that might lead to opportunities once the nightmare is over?
Yes, I do. I think we've seen some incredible stories, haven't we, with businesses. I think there was one on your podcast last week, Carwyn, that changed what it was doing to making face masks, I think. But did it in weeks. There's where we are down in Llangennach, there's a well-known defence company that you know as well, Carwyn, very well, who have begun producing hand sanitizer, and they work in 24 hours a day around the clock. They were producing another chemical process for the defence industry. They've switched it to hand sanitizer. And I saw a police van down here today collecting a pallet load. I'm guessing for David Powers Police. They've done that in weeks. So, there's no lack of innovation and speed when required. And I think the whole risk element around doing business is something that, these companies have met head on in this case and been very successful with it. So I think we need bold policies. We need to try and we need to use the word risk, I think, a little less than we do. And that's public sector in particular, but private sector as well, particularly the large companies in the private sector. And we need to look at the sort of buy British scenario. I really think that's important now going forward, not just because, we're gonna buy British and we're gonna produce things ourselves here because, commercially it makes sense. But I think in this instance, and again, going back to what's happening with Brexit, it does make sense because it protects our supply chains. It strengthens our base of actually doing stuff, not just providing services. You talked about manufacturing earlier, but it strengthens our base, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time to develop a supply chain and develop, established manufacturing processes. So I think this is a great opportunity. The stuff you're doing in North Wales, for instance, Alwen, it's very important that those opportunities are grasped. So we look at industries that really help us. I'll just give a quick scenario. If you've been eating a prawn sandwich today, Carwyn, I'm not saying you have, but let's say you have.
It's not a crime or anything, it's all right.
Well, the chances of that prawn coming from a country where the mangrove trees have all been chopped down to get it to you, and there's probably been slave labour involved also to get it to you, is quite high. Now, the aquaculture market is something we've stumbled across. We've been asked to look at it because we can clean water to the standard. We can produce prawns in a warehouse down the road if we need to. What an amazing market that could be. And it's not just prawns. It could be cod. It could be any fish. Homegrown here in Wales. It needs back in. And I think, I'm not saying the personal piece, I mean the policy and the opportunity is there, and it's there right now. So I think those are the things we've got to grab, Carwyn. Those are the opportunities we've got to look at. And and they'll be incredibly good for Wales, and we lead on it.
Alwen, from your perspective, we talked, I mentioned earlier on the suggestion that we need to see a better security of supply, really, in terms of UK companies being able to access the parts that they need. I remember after Foot and Mouth, people just didn't realise where their food was coming from. They took a lot more interest in the provenance of their food at that point, and that really helped in terms of people wanting to be able to buy local, for example. Are you seeing anything from your perspective in terms of businesses starting to think more about, well, actually, it'd be quite handy for us, even though it might cost us a little bit more, to be able to get what we need much closer than having to buy perhaps from countries a long way away?
Yeah, without a doubt, I think people are absolutely focusing their minds on how they live local, and that is at very granular level as well. From, you know, how do I get my hands on a veg box for my family to feed us for the next few weeks, all the way through to the thought processes associated with supply chains within businesses, and really self-scrutinizing. I think self-scrutinizing how many miles are in those sort of supply chains. And, you know, Wales, we're famous, our foundation economy is world famous for agriculture and the supply of food and drink. So I think, and, you know, aligned to what Wayne was saying around the innovation that's possible in that sector, to sort of build on a really solid foundation economy, and actually take that into something that's sustainable for Wales as a foundation economy for the future, and bringing those growers and those producers and manufacturing, again, you know, very, very strong in Wales on our history of manufacturing, particularly in northeast Wales as well. I think there are lots of opportunities now where the concepts that we've spoken about for years, such as, you know, the use of artificial intelligence and 3D printing in manufacturing, they are now front and center of the way we're responding to this global pandemic. And it's going back from where we end up. So I think for me, it's about, you know, taking what we learn from this process, and we are learning as we're doing, because we're innovating so quickly, taking what we're learning as we go through and start to shape the future economies of Wales through programs like the North Wales Growth Deal and what we can deliver through that and other funding streams, to make sure that we are educating and aligning with this new world as well.
We come back, don't we, I suppose, to procurement in a way, and how do you make sure that as many, let's say, Welsh companies for now have the ability to bid for contracts in Wales? I mean, there's a dangerous line there. You want to bid across the UK as well and further. But one of the things I found, both in rural affairs and as First Minister, is that quite often, you know, not all Welsh companies, I mean, you'd be an exception there, Wayne, but a lot of Welsh companies were just not big enough to be able to bid successfully for the contracts. The contracts were big, you know. If you've got a road contract, you guys split it up into several different contracts to make it easier for, you know, Welsh companies, a lot of Welsh companies to bid, or you have to encourage them to work together. And what we did in farming is with the NHS beef contract, there was no Welsh company big enough to supply it. Day after day, week after week, month after month. Eventually, through a system of cooperation, they did get there, and everyone profited as a result of it. I mean, you've just obviously been talking to the Egyptian government and other governments, but do you find, perhaps with other businesses in Wales, that perhaps they need to be a little bit bigger, a little bit more critical mass, or need to cooperate more in order to be able to be successful in bidding for government contracts?
Yes. Yes to both of them as well, I think.
Definitely. I love a straight answer. No good in politics.
No, I think yes to size of the company. So one of the problems, and I remember when you first became First Minister, I think we talked about it then, about how do you move from a small company to a company that's able to sponsor the national stadium, for instance. That is, you know, that takes time, and it takes support, and it takes money, and so on, and it takes, you know, winning orders. But you can't win those orders if you're not big enough. So I think one of the opportunities is consortium. We're looking at a deal right now in the Middle East where we're too small for it, but we have to pull together a consortium to deliver it. And you know, companies, well, people who want to buy are absolutely fine with that. So I think there's an approach here, Carwyn, where maybe it's a sort of Welsh Government Ken Skates area where we pull companies together and build consortiums so we can bid for these bigger deals. And DFID is another example of that. 14 billion every year spent. It's very hard to get onto the DFID system because, again, unless you're big enough, you've got that critical mass to take on some of these big long-term contracts. You're going to struggle. So I think consortium is probably the way forward until, you know, certain companies get big enough to be able to take on the larger contracts on their own.
So let me take us on to the way this is affecting not just the way we behave generally, but the effect potentially on business. One of the issues that's been raised is if we end up in a situation where pre-vaccine, which is a fair way off, we have some people, there's a reliable test that's available to everyone that shows who is immune and who isn't. Do you end up creating a situation then where people who are immune have more freedom to go out than those who are not immune? I mean, one of the jokes I heard the other day was, you know, in my day, you know, you met your life partner through quite often by going out on a Saturday night, and you chat to them, and you know the chat line was, "Can I buy you a drink?" No, it's, "Can I show you my immunity certificate?" What does it mean for behaviour socially? I can't imagine when I was that age not being able to go out to the Saturday night and the effect that must have. But of course, it's got a more serious effect as well on business. You know, what if we get to a situation where some of your workers have antibodies and some don't? What does that mean? Do you create a situation, not you as a business, but are you entering a situation where those who are immune say we're not working with them, or they've got to stay over there? And all these things start to emerge, don't they? Not just in terms of the way we behave as individuals by creating a different class of people who are not infectious or have had the illness, and what the effect might be on business. Wayne, is that something that, I mean, this is all, you know, new thinking, and nobody would want to get to that position.
No.
It's certainly been an argument that I've heard, not proposed, but where people say, well, hang on a second, this might be something that might happen, and is this really desirable?
Yes, I wouldn't even know how to begin to plan for that one. But one thing that may work in our favour then is we do jobs abroad. So some of our team are scattered to the four winds anyway. We've learned over the last 4 weeks quite successfully, actually. We've been able to project manage. In the last couple of weeks, we have shipped equipment into Alexandria. We have shipped equipment into Riyadh in Saudi for that other contract we've won with the National Water Company. So, but it's stopped there because obviously we can't get the people on the ground to do the installation of the next phase. But I've no idea where I would, or how I'd plan for that one, Carwyn.
Yeah.
No idea.
No, it's a tough one, isn't it? We're not there yet, thankfully, and hopefully a vaccine can be produced as quickly as possible. One of the issues, Alwen, of course, is this, isn't it? That we can't be sure that the pandemic is over until there's a vaccine and until most people have had that vaccine administered. Now, what, in terms of what we do in the meantime, the big question for government now will be, well, how do you open up? You can't just do it as a big bang. Other countries seem to want, one country wants to do it that way. But you know, how do you, from your perspective, what sort of businesses do you think would be able to open up first? There's been talk in European countries, there's been talk of what we've seen, garden centres opening, we've seen DIY shops opening, Italy today, bookshops, laundrettes, and so on. I mean, what sort of businesses do you think might be able to get close, well, not back to normal, but back to some kind of normality, perhaps before others?
I think it's a really difficult one to answer. I think I've been watching in the news, you know, what's happening in other countries, and I'm asking myself the question, is it a strategy of herd immunity? Is it like, let's start to open these various businesses to see if we can edge towards that sort of herd immunity scenario where you are bringing people together. And in that way, you're building resilience towards the the virus, or is it strategic in terms of providing services and goods that are really needed in society? And I'm kind of on the fence, still watching with interest what's happening in other countries that are further along than we are, and asking myself the question, are they doing the right thing? What's going to happen in a month's time? Because they've begun to open these businesses up. There's undoubtedly going to be a second wave. We know that. I think, just listening to you describe that scenario with businesses and how they deal with people who have antibodies and maybe haven't, to me it just sounds like some dystopian novel that you pick off the shelf in a bookstore and decide, actually that sounds like a good read, but we're living that. And I still find it really bizarre when you start to replay these, what seems like a really dystopian different world, and then recognizing we're heading into this for real now. What do we do? And I think it's a question I find difficult to answer, actually.
Well, I don't think anyone's got the answer to it, to be honest, and but it's something that we've got to guard against. I would say that we don't want to be in a situation where there's de facto segregation of people as to whether they've tested as having the antibodies or not. I mean, we're not in a position by a long shot yet to be able to do that. But you end up in that situation, you create a sort of, biological elite, don't you? That makes it difficult for everyone else. You're right; it is very dystopian. For your perspective, Wayne, I mean, are you having any customers saying to you, or you find if you're buying from other countries, that you have to go through specific biosecurity checks before you can even ship things out?
Yes, yeah, and we know that that's happening when it's reaching destinations. I just mentioned Alexandria, for instance. There is a massive program in Egypt where we've shipped in 7 containers, 7 40-foot containers of equipment, and we know that's going through a quite a detailed process to make sure that it's safe before it moves on to Hurghada, which is its ultimate destination. So we know that's happening. I will say, once the travel restrictions are coming down, when we talk about businesses functioning, I think with the right guidance on protective equipment, we could probably function. Our team, we're in oil fields and places that are normally quite remote anyway. But providing during the travel process and during the operation of the work that our team does, we could function once the travel restrictions are up, providing I think we get a bit of guidance on, for instance, do these face masks work? And if they do, what ones do we buy? And, using hand sanitizer and gloves and everything else that we need to use. But I think, we could probably function, and there'll be other companies like us certainly that could function, which are not really close quarter stuff. When we build in some of these plants, guys will be 50, 60 foot away from each other at least. So, in a lot of cases, providing the travel piece is covered, I'm not sure how that would work, but that the safety equipment I think is going to be important, and the right guidance from the government with the specialist skills to tell us, what's safe and what isn't safe. So I think we could function once the travel restrictions are lifted.
Let's look at travel then briefly, and the environmental opportunities that may exist where people travel less. We've seen NO2 levels dropping, really dramatically in the past couple of weeks. We've seen, very polluted cities, particularly in Asia. We're seeing, blue skies much more regularly than they used to. I suppose the question is this: I mean, will people travel less? Who knows? But secondly, have we got our infrastructure right? And perhaps, Alwen, this is something you could help us on. I used to say, so I still do, that broadband is the equivalent in the 21st century to railway lines in the 19th. You have to be connected. But of course, in the UK, the tendency has been to sort of craft on fibre broadband rather than fibre optic onto the existing copper cabling and the existing network, rather than investing as a country. And I used to do it for BT, but I'm not singling out BT here, but investing as a country in proper fibre optic broadband, as other countries have done. Is that one area where we, instead of perhaps that old British attitude of, we've got this, and so we'll make it a bit better, we'll craft something onto it.
Yeah.
rather than let's build something completely new. So you've got you've got HST over there, and you've got a 150-year-old line over there that you're trying to, do a little bit more with on capacity. Do we need to make that step change in terms of infrastructure?
Yeah, I think we do. And I think we are actually on digital infrastructure. I think we're really testing the resilience of the legacy infrastructure, which is the bit that uses the existing copper network and builds on that. But side by side, we're building a whole new full fiber network as well. And I think the last month has been the best user case test for the resilience of that network, and to see whether the capacity that can be provided is being used. I think, going back to the transport question, I think without a doubt, people will want to continue to travel less. And I think part of that is the culture and the trust in the digital infrastructure that can support productivity to the same extent as traveling to business meetings, etc. So I think people will be more mindful over how they manage their time and how they individually and organizationally get the best productivity using a mixture of technology and possibly less travel. So again, it's one of those transformational changes that I think has happened as a result of COVID-19 that will not be undone. I can't see us going back to how we used to be. And the one of the positive outcomes of that is the positive impact on the emissions and the environmental situation, and what that then means for the future generations as well.
And it's going to take substantial investment, as you said. Wayne, if I could just ask you finally, do we still suffer from that sort of British mentality of trying to make things do? I think it's probably post-war in many ways, but I'll give you one example. When the second Severn crossing was built, any other country, I think, would have built a rail deck underneath it and shut the Severn tunnel down. It was built in 1886. It pumps out, I think, 1 million gallons of water a day. It's that dramatic. And said, right, we'll invest. We'll put something brand new there, and then we can shut this old tunnel down, which is causing us real problems in terms of its upkeep, and has caused immense problems in terms of the electrification. We just don't do it. HS2 has been controversial in other countries. France, Italy, with the Italian railways are way superior to ours. Do we still suffer from this mentality that big investment is something we don't do? We simply sort of make do and improve slightly what we already have.
Yeah, I think it goes back to my first point, Carwyn, regarding ambition, first of all, and risk. At the end of the day, if we want to, if we really want to progress in the UK, but very much in Wales, because we've got even more limitations, I think. Then we've got to make these big decisions, and we've got to take the lead. There's travel issues in Wales. We know that whether we agree with it or not. For instance, regarding the M4, there's limitations with the airport as to where it's located and where it goes, where it travels to. Hence, Bristol, I think, mops up a lot of the Welsh travel community. But I think we've got to be bold, and we've got to look long term. Money at the moment is cheap. Interest rates are low. This is the time to do it. But I just think we have to have a big business vision, starting in Wales, looking at what we're really good at, and looking at the industries that we can grab hold of and make our own. Hydrogen fuel cells, developed here. I've mentioned aquaculture. I think the whole of the UK imports something like 97 to 98% of the big five fish. What a great opportunity. So I just think, yes, is the answer to your question, Karen. I think we do, but we've got to be bold, and we've got to be ambitious, and we've got to make it happen, I guess.
Well, we've run out of time, unfortunately, but it's been a great pleasure to have both of you on. Alwen, diolch yn fawr iawn. Wayne, good to see you as well, and it's been a pleasure having you both. You've been listening to the weekly business review of Business News Wales, hosted by me, Carwyn Jones. I look forward to seeing you all next week. In the meantime, keep safe.